Folks, go on Amazon and check out my book, The Oklahoma Bigfoot File. This is my first solo effort after co-authoring 2 books with my good friend James Williams, who you know as Dark Waters. These were given to me personally by Oklahoma natives. They've never been heard before in the public. You have to get the book to hear them. And the good thing is, this is only volume 1. Check it out on Amazon or Kindle. And I'll see you on The Late Show.
Oh, no one about it. Yeah, goddamn right.
This is a purely satirical production from the last Baron of Bigfoot. It is not meant to cause distress emotionally to any individual. Hey, you too. The Baron wants no smoke.
This time, Spots had what seemed like real blood pouring out from the wound, but folks, listen. The smell of this bloodhead was akin to the stinky spray road bomb straight from the railroads of hell itself. The Baron then threw the axe in the back of his dad's truck and began cussing at me and raising Cain. I briefly thought to pull my shooting gimmick and plug Baron just like he did to poor Spot when I noticed he had somehow already taken it from me. Fellow Americans, somehow Spot had yet again managed to disappear completely. The more time I spent with the animal, the more he reminded me of those mean ghosts that lived in my house, appearing and disappearing after rudely pushing people down steps. Seeing as how Baron had yet again killed my dog, and the dog somehow disappeared, I began to get really sad and angry. The Baron had now twice killed my poor dog Spot. He looked me dead square in the eyes and said, "All abominations before the eyes of God must die." Not knowing what this meant, I became very angry. I had witnessed my dog friend now murdered by my human friend twice. I yelled and cussed at the Baron, who seemed to think the pain at the loss of Spot was hilarious. "You killed my dog twice now. There's no way to be an animal lover, kind sir. I sent your demonic abomination of a dog to the only place suited for such a goddamn monstrosity, the lake of hellfire." With all my might, I punched him square in the face, which broke his glasses. "It's on you, Joe. Put up your dukes and let's have a good old-fashioned game of fisticuff. As you wish, Baron. You will be begging for the quick release given by my shooting gimmick. Pop-Pop will make the flipper lip stop. Damn you, Joe. You are about a silly and satanic son of a bitch. You know that, don't you? You think so, do you, then? Well, by George, challenge is accepted." He barely moved an inch, but a trickle of blood began to come out of his nose. Upon seeing his own blood, the Baron went mad. We began exchanging punches to the face. He loosened my teeth and my eyes began seeing in different directions, but I fought back harder than ever. "Sleepy Joe, your dog is now and will forever remain in the fires of a burning hell, where the worm does not die. There is weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. Shut up your crazy mouth, Baron. You're not making sense at all. I gotta find my shooting gimmick. A few bullets will help you understand how crazy you are." His father had come out and gotten in his pickup truck, completely ignoring our brawl until he told us to get out of the driveway so we could back up. After watching him drive off, we both resumed our fight. I picked up a neighbor's mailbox out of the ground and used it as a hammer, hitting Doss hard in the top of the head. This time it would be Baron walking like Charlie Chaplin. After walking around like a wind-up robot toy, he came to and picked up a rock. Surprisingly, he took off running to the side of his house. Not knowing him to be a coward and fearful he might grab a shooting gimmick, I followed in close pursuit with the mailbox in hand. He jumped through his bedroom window like an acrobat and quickly re-emerged with his trusty slingshot. I begged and pleaded for mercy. "The rich man also died, Sleepy Joe." Then in hell he lifted up his eyes. "Baron, I never know what the hell you're talking about. You're a crazy person, Baron." Folks, the Baron was like Kenny Oakley with his slingshot. He possessed almost supernatural accuracy, but I had broken his glasses. I told him that his church talks about mercy and forgiveness. This seemed to stall him with what I imagined were flashbacks to his favorite Bible cartoons long enough for me to swing the mailbox into his head again. "Take that, you silver-tongued rascal." Fellow Americans, I knew then that the only way to make things right with all parties involved was to bash the Baron's brains out. His parents would likely have another child who wasn't as mean as Baron. I made a vow that the new baby Baron would be the first to get a puppy from Spot whenever he met his canine wife. I told Baron goodbye as I swung the mailbox hard towards the back of his head as he laid motionless on the ground. To my surprise, Mr. Doss was playing possum and did some sort of karate move or something that knocked me off of my feet. He took a decent running start before kicking me square in the head. The world began spinning, but I could see that Baron yet again had jumped into his bedroom window. I figured he was making a calculated retreat, but to my surprise, he came back outside with a crossbow. I watched helpless as the Baron placed an arrow in his crossbow. "Don't do it, Baron! You'll regret this for the rest of your life. Shut up, Joe. You and your son of a bitch dog will be together soon, burning in flames as you walk through the dog parks of a forever fiery hell." He smiled and lined up his shot. I was fading in and out of consciousness, but was saved whenever his dad's truck could be heard coming up the street. He quickly moved the arrow, threw everything back through his bedroom window. He then kicked me in the face and jumped into his room, shutting the window behind him. I woke up moments later to his mother's voice yelling. I looked to see her and Baron outside. She was pointing at me as she yelled at the Baron. The blood in my ears made it hard to hear. My parents apparently had called during our brawl and asked the DOS matriarch could I stay with them for the week while they attended to church business. Upon his mother seeing my busted face, the Baron found himself in trouble. He kept pointing at me and shaking his head, looking confused that his father started up the driveway, which seemed to make him remember that he witnessed the fight on his way out. He put an arm around me to prop me up and started talking loudly about what a great game of cowboys and Indians we had just played. After we got to his room, he tossed me to the floor and sat by himself, reading comic books. The next day at school, I saw him in the hall talking to our science teacher. He was asking about hybrid wolves and who made traps, and he was told to go back to class. I turned my attention to the window where I saw guess who, my friend Spot, in a tree. I threw a book through the window of my classroom and jumped out of it. I ran to the tree line where I saw my free friend, but like Houdini, he yet again vanished. I returned to class and received first swats from a paddle administered by the principal. Whenever I told him about Spot, he gave me 3 more for lying. I demanded that Mr. Doss be brought in as a witness. This made Baron angry at me all over again. He showed up in the elves looking very confused. He then looked at me and shook his head before he went in to see the principal. I could hear a lot of back and forth in the sounds Baron makes whenever he begins to pace around like an old angry drunk. He usually only reserved this type of aggressive behavior for whenever people would say things against the downtrodden railroad bums or other stinky street people. I thought to myself that the sickness of his mind and their delusions began achieving new heights of sheer madness. The Baron told our principal that there was indeed some dog that likely was in a tree stalking around looking to murder someone. I heard the principal yell and threatened to call both of our parents. Doss came out of the principal's office and walked silently past me and back to class. On our walk home, he still refused to talk. I broke the ice by regaling him with stories about those mean old ghosts within the walls of my home. Sadly, the incident with the principal took away that infectious laughter and he ignored me. Folks, my feelings were genuinely damaged by the whole thing. Not wanting because there were problems. At least until I got my shooting gimmick back, I took off through the woods for a shortcut and to consult the god of the forest that my parents sacrificed goats so I would stop pissing the bed. I immediately became lost until my dog Spot emerged from a grave with a broken tombstone that was in the middle of the forest for some reason. He had grown to be almost the same size as the truck that Baron's dad drove, so I jumped on his back. He took me straight to the doll's house and disappeared back into the trees. Baron walked to the porch asking him. I got home faster than he did while traveling in the opposite direction through the woods. In a flash directly behind the Baron, there was a fiery light that reminded me of a match being lit popped up, and there was old crafty Spot. The strange powers that the Baron would sometimes display that he attributed to someone called the Holy Spirit must have immediately warned him of the danger. Right as the massive dog Spot appeared behind him, Baron jumped like a kitty cat that's had hot bacon grease thrown on their back. This time, we both got to see my wonderful pet disappear into what looked like heat waves that instantaneously appeared behind him. We both stood there in shock and disbelief before Baron socked me square in the nose. His eyes were all scary looking again. He ranted on for a long time about a guy he liked to call the captain of his salvation. According to what I remember from watching Bible cartoons with the Baron superhero role model, a white horse would show up and eventually beat all bad guys and monsters and animals like Spot. Afterwards, he would have his hired men throw them in a lake of fire or something. The Baron in his beloved Bible cartoon said that this lake would be made of fire, but folks, listen, I don't think there's a lake in the world that has fire instead of water. Upon hearing this madness, I remember snitching on the Baron to his parents for telling me this sick and crazy lie, but folks, guess what? They said it was true. His mom did anyways. His dad would always tell me to go play and leave him alone. Anyways, after researching this horse-ready person, as well as the magical lake at the Upside Down Bible Church's library, I found out the Baron's superhero role model was indeed real, although with one exception. He was the bad guy, not the heroic protagonist. And I read that a friendly red dragon was the real champion. Excited to be able to talk Bible stuff with the Baron, I told him what I had learned. I scoffed at the notion and told him that there's a big red dragon that will come from the sea to stop this person. How this dragon was one of my parents' top role models and possibly a founder of the Upside Down, the Bible Church. Upon hearing this, Baron immediately punched me again. Folks, listen, I didn't have it in me to fight anymore. I started screaming and crying and raising hell until his mom showed up. His efforts to shut me up were fruitless, and his 6-foot-tall mom appeared just as suddenly as Spot disappeared. And she didn't look too happy with Baron and demanded that he retrieve something from someplace on their property she referred to as a switch. So upon reflection, folks, Baron must have been a dumber kid than I remembered to make such a nice lady mad so often. He then was whipped like how I imagined Santa Claus whips his reindeer near to death, having only a single night to deliver the world's presents. I always thought that the names were really stations or positions they held, given that the originals were beaten completely to death by old Saint Nick. After beating that would be by today's standards akin to whipping rented mules, the Baron was forced to apologize and shook my hand. After giving Baron a crazy look, his mom retired back to the Dawes family home, where I'm sure she was doing something akin to what angels do in their downtime. What a terrible and angry kid Baron was for such a sweet lady, I thought to myself. He then whispered some cuss words at me and something about sweet revenge before retiring into his room to sulk for the rest of the evening. The next morning before school, Baron was nowhere to be found. His father said he had early wrestling practice. I looked for him in the wrestling room, but he was the only one missing. There was unusual behavior for him. I didn't really give a shit because he had been a mean bully to me for a prolonged period of time. As I walked to class, I could see Baron in the woods stalking around with his crossbow. I immediately dropped a dime on him to the principal, who threatened me with more swats for bothering him with nonsense. Anyways, we came and went quickly, but Spot never reappeared. Listen, folks, for all the trouble he had caused, I was glad of it in a way. Even more weeks went by and it was almost summertime. On the last day of school, Mr. Dawes suggested that we skip the rest of the day. Surprised at this newfound rebellion, I excitedly said, let's go. As it turns out, school was indeed ending early that day, but for Mr. Clean type of character like Baron was a decent start. Anyways, we took the same rural road to go to the same ice cream shop as the beginning of the story, folks. I think the Baron even flirted with what would have been the same demon-filled girls. As we walked along the same rural road as we did the beginning of our amazing adventure, we saw the same railroad bomb. This time he was face down in the gutter. We dashed to this stinky vagrant to see we could be of assistance, and fortunately, folks, he had expired. We gently turned him over, and I can't be for sure the road cause was untimely death, but it probably had to do with the fact that his throat and most of his face had been ripped off. Both the Baron and myself ran through the woods towards his house to inform the authorities of Jack the Ripper's return. We ran through the woods fast, but suddenly Baron stopped dead in his tracks. The sight we saw was unimaginable. Our principal was there eating something out of his blood-filled hands. Baron looked shocked and asked the principal why he was in the woods and did he see that railroad bomb. What happened next made me pee on myself a little bit. Not a lot, folks, just a little. Barely was able to notice. The principal turned to Baron and started speaking with what sounded like 3 scary voices. One of these voices sounded like this amazing Black Devil blues guitarist named Bucka White that Baron's dad would play while entertaining his scary military buddies in the driveway of their family home on Saturday nights. They drink what Baron called by medicine. This medicinal liquid was always served in mason jars. Once Baron and I found what I perceived to be the prescription bottle, which was big and had 3 X's and a pirate skull on it. The Baron told me that my eyes hurt and I needed to drink some. I told him after smelling it that the pharmacist accidentally put gasoline in it. He then further told me about my weak and alien eyes, to which I replied how they were fine. He then violently poked his fingers in them in the style of 3 Stooges. Afterwards, he began pouring this terrible liquid down my throat. Upon further reflection, fellow Americans, the Baron was kind of mean bastard at times. Anyways, though, that mean old principal was a sick son of a gun and apparently accountable on top of that. The ways I immediately laid down to go to sleep after this, which was how my buddy reacts to fear, but the Baron grabbed my shirt collar and ran through the woods like a character from Dragon Ball Z. We finally made it to the Dawes home's porch where he collapsed from exhaustion. Shortly after arrival, his dad came outside and was stopped by a hysterical Baron. Mr. Dawes, the senior, looked at Baron and listened intently. Folks, let me tell you this, I never thought that the Baron's dad was any more than a shared imaginary friend of ours, or some kind of computer-projected image like in Dee's Buck Rogers comic, because he always seemed to be around, but no one seemed to notice him except us. No, wait, sorry, folks, everyone did. Sorry, I got confused. Surprisingly, he seemed to believe Baron. He grabbed 3 rifles for each of us and told us to show him where we saw the principal. We went through the woods and found the scary principal. He had for some reason taken off all of his clothes and was into the Baron's boxcar hitchhiking friend. Dee's dad yelled at him, which made him turn around. His eyes were glowing red and his hair was slowly growing longer. Baron and I said, holy shit, at the same time, followed closely by his dad. I politely told Mr. Dawes that I felt it wasn't a good idea to watch him turn into what we all knew would end up being my dog Spot. All present agreed. Baron ran towards his house until he heard his father and I start shooting. On sea retreat wasn't on the menu. The Baron came back fired his gun like the rifleman, and I pretended I was Paladin, the gentleman gunslinger, and Baron's dad was my favorite cartoon character. Of course, the crafty quick draw McGraw. I realized I had said all that out loud when Mr. Doss yelled for me to shut the hell up. With our rifles empty, the principal monster shot all the shit we quietly made our way back home. I asked Mr. Doss would we go to Sing Sing and turn big rocks into little rocks for killing our principal, of which he replied go somewhere to play and leave him alone. He then opened a Pabst Blue Ribbon can of beer, sat down in his recliner, and watched cartoons with Baron and I. I actually think I had even heard him laugh a few times whenever the great Gezu called Fred Flintstone Dum-Dum. After a few episodes of Flintstones, Mr. Doss said he was going to call his buddies from the lodge to come take care of that mean old principal. In no time flat, his scary military buddies showed up in an actual military truck. They all left and shortly returned with the body, which had started to heal itself. Mr. Doss and his army buddies thought the best course of action was to listen to Howling Wolf and smash the reanimated werewolf principal spot with baseball bats, shovels, and the butts of their rifles. They occasionally took breaks to laugh and drink that disgusting medicine. Baron and I sat on the porch eating animal crackers and watching. I thought to myself, Mr. Doss and all his friends must have the eyesight of eagles after ingesting so much of the medicinal tonic for visual ailments. After a long time, Mrs. Doss emerged to give Mr. Doss the same crazy look she gave Baron just before his slavery-style whipping. She informed Mr. Doss supper was ready and to send his riffraff buddies away. Baron and I finished our adventure eating pork chops and discussing blues guitars. The end.
Thank you for taking time to speak with the Bugle, Mr. President. Jumping right into it, some folks say you're just a hater and President Biden is like a cool grandfather that you're trying to flip out of his easy chair. These sources have also said that you're jealous of his misadventures.
Look, I think you are a sophisticated guy. You're an intelligent man. We don't agree on a lot, but I respect you to a certain degree, so listen. Sleepy Joe is referring to a complete stranger like Mr. Doss is everything but who he actually is. The dummy has listened to some Crazy Monster Stories podcast, and now all of a sudden this gentleman, Mr. Doss, has gone from his grandson to his old classmate. Joe doesn't even know when it's time to get up for breakfast. Do you understand? This whole ordeal is a disgrace and a mess. It's an embarrassment to the cryptid community. And now think about this. What has poor Mr. Doss been forced to go through? This poor guy, this has to end very soon because people's mental health is on the line. And no one seems to have any control over, and obviously, senile Joe Biden.
Even in his younger years, he seemed to have an affinity for guns, or as he called them, shooting gimmicks. Wouldn't this show that he has an in-depth knowledge of their danger?
He's one of the most anti-gun presidents in the history of our great republic, yet he's talking about carrying guns into classrooms and holding this guy Doss at gunpoint. He's claimed to have done so on several different occasions throughout the course of 100 years or so, all according to himself, of course. Now, do you see how ludicrous this has all become? Where's his next make-believe adventure taking place? Maybe they'll go to the moon. Hey, look, it's like this, and I'm sure when I tell you this, you will finally understand. This man is giving dates ranging between 1919 and 1941. Neither Mr. Doss or Sleepy Joe were even alive during this period of time.
Now that you put it that way, wait a minute. Yes, that actually makes more sense than a man in his 80s and a gentleman who's not yet pretty being classmates. Actually, that's pretty crazy.
Crazy, the sick part. Now you're going to understand this. This sick part is no one seems to want to do a damn thing about it. The man has implicated Mr. Doss as well as his late father, who's an Army veteran, in the murder of some educator who he claims was a wolf man. This man is a menace. How much longer before he flashes back to his popkin days and shoots someone?
Perhaps we should be a little more empathetic towards the president, given all the... How do I say this without getting sued, okay? Oh, wait, not that. Okay, yes. Even the social problems as of like that his son unfortunately has had to endure. Maybe we should be more empathetic to his current struggles with mental health.
Look, this widow son of a bitch and is no good. Hophead son should both share the same jail cell, or at this point the same padded room. If I hear of one more crazy bullshit story that Sleepy Joe puts out about some crap with monsters and wolfmen, then I will call that elder abuse hotline. I'll see to it that everyone involved will turn big rocks into little rocks for the next 30 years.
Well, shit, I told Parker to get pictures at this particular press conference. We could have captured that blackness that sometimes takes over the eyes of the president. Note to self, fire Peter Parker. Sorry, sir. Now, as I was saying, at this point, it doesn't seem like anyone can do much of anything to dial back the madness of the president. What are your suggestions, if any? Do you know any photographers looking for work? Stupid Parker.
You better get your shit together, Joe, because you and your goddamn junkie kid are flying this plane into a mountain. I better not ever see another episode of this crazy and ludicrous shit for as long as the internet remains a thing. Or so help me, I'll post the National Guard around the insane asylum you get tossed into.
Well, you heard it here first. Hello, Americans and true believers.
Hey, boss. Sorry I'm late, but I had to, I had laundry. Yes, that's right. My clothes caught on fire. Hey, wait. Oh, wow. You're the former Commander-in-Chief, Mr. Donald Trump. Anyways, hey, what did I miss, boss?
If you agree that Sleepy Joe should be placed in elder abuse protective care, then hit the like button, subscribe to stay current on his deteriorating situation, and share this video for mental health awareness. Hashtag Mr. Dust is only 38.
Thank you, subscribers. Hey, don't leave yet. Wait, I said, click the bell. Don't be a hater. Parker. Hey, Parker. Tell these people where the bell is or you're fired.